Okay, everyone, we are live. Welcome to round 3 on the new heaven and the new earth, a brighter world that is being prepared as we speak, ready to reveal itself. So we're continuing what we've been learning the last 2 weeks. This is in Lekutei Torah, Shir, Hashirim, all the way in the end, the last discourse of Lekutei Torah. It starts on page 96 or on page Memches Amid Dalid. We've learned already 2 pages, and we are holding on page 98, second column, by the parentheses, Ubir Inyan. Ubir Inyan. Okay, so listen to the first 2 classes to get the flow of it. Let me just say the point. Point was that man was created in order to invite God into the world, and God's invitation into the world first takes place that he's invited into the Garden of Eden. Before man starts to do his work, only Hashem's radiance, and a small limited radiance, shines into the Garden of Eden, shines into the paradise where the souls enjoy that light. But it's only a ray, and the reason why it's only a ray is because we can't handle more than a ray. So as a creation, as a limited being, we couldn't handle more than a ray. But God goes and creates the physical Adam and Eve and puts them in the Garden of Eden, which those days were physical, a lower manifestation of the Garden of Eden, of Gan Eden, in order for them to learn Torah and do mitzvot, like it says, La'avda l'shama, to work and to guard the garden. And via doing that, which, as we learned in the last 2 weeks, only souls enclosed in bodies have that power to be able to trigger the descent that God himself should come visit Gan Eden. Like happens every midnight, it says that God comes to visit himself. It's not just the pleasures of his light, but he himself comes to the Garden of Eden to visit and to spend time with the souls. Now, eventually that means, as we're soon going to see, he doesn't only stay in the Garden of Eden, which is the spiritual world. He's invited all the way down here to earth. And it's not just a light of him, but it's him himself. Now, in order to provoke that, in order to engage that, we learned that it requires, why is it only the souls on earth that can do that? Because we learned that in order to invite God in, we need something that triggers him. To trigger him, being that God himself is infinitely beyond the creation. So we need a type of a pull or a trigger that can transcend the limitations of creation and reach out into the infinite, can send shockwaves up into the infinite. And that requires, therefore, the love of the soul, but only the love of the soul that is not a reasonable love, not a love that's based on any kind of an appreciation of who God is, because that will always be finite, according to the mind, according to the constraints of a limited mind. Let it be the celestial beings above, but even celestial beings are still limited. And therefore their appreciation, which is fueling their love, is also limited, which means that the shockwaves that their love is creating, or the waves that their love is creating, is only limited waves, which don't vibrate into the infinite. In order to send vibrations into the infinite, one needs to have a limitless rapture of love. That kind of love only comes through darkness. In other words, it comes from the essence of the soul, not the design of the soul, not the powers of the soul. It requires the unearthing of the very bare essence of the soul. When it cries, and what causes us to cry? It gets stressed out by the darkness. And that happens in this world because we are so blocked, because our souls get so constricted. for that very reason, when we finally break through and we cry out from such a deep place. And it's a limitless awakening. And that's what touches God. And that's what invites God and attracts him and brings him down. How is he supposed to know in his infinite self that anybody even wants him? So we need to send him that message. We can only send him that message from the transcendental love of our soul, which we learned is called the heaven in our soul. Hashemayim. That's the meaning of when it says, Hashemayim kisi, the heavens are my throne. Which means just like a throne invites someone to sit down on it, which causes the lowering down of the king onto the throne. In this case, God has to endlessly lower himself down to move into the creation. That he himself should be present in the creation, not just his energies, but he himself should come down into the creation. He needs the heaven. The heaven is that part of our soul, like we learned in last week's class, the fire of our soul. Remember, we said the heaven is primarily made up of fire. That rutzo, that desire, that longing, that super rational, insane love. That's our heaven in us, and that's what triggers the love. That's a summary kind of what we learned, and obviously with so much rich explanation. So now we're going to explain. We'll continue further. Ubira Inyan, and the explanation is as follows. Ki hakise. I do want to read over the last few lines. So according to what we learned already, because that's what he's explaining now, according to this explanation, the heavens are his throne. Is the heaven means the heaven inside of us. Our soul has a earth and a heaven. Remember, I'll clarify. I'll make this a little more, refresh your memories for those who were here last week. That the soul has 5 parts to it. 3 of the parts of the soul, 3 other dimensions of the soul are vested in our human consciousness, are vested in our bodies, and that's why it's called the earth of us. And then 2 parts of the soul called the Chai and the Yechida, the Chachma and the Keter of our soul. The Chai and the Yechida, those are transcendental elements of our soul, and that's called the heaven. And when we are in the darkness, that's what triggers these transcendental energies of the soul. That even souls, when they're in heaven, don't know about it, don't feel it, don't tap their own infinite lights. And that heaven, that dimension of soul, he said that in prayer it's called love God not only with all your heart, not only with all your soul, but with all your might. With all your might. That's the Yechida. That's what pulls Hashem down. V'ahavtas Hashem Elokecha. Love God. Draw him down. Draw him to you. So according to that, the heaven is our heaven, our transcendence, our transcendent soul. However, he added one little point in the last, and I said it very briefly because I was literally falling asleep last week at the end of the class. I was sleep talking by the time I got to this part. So let's go back a few lines. Umihu hagoyrim lazeh. I was going to start Ubira Inyan halfway, or the parentheses on page 98, but just a tiny bit, a little bit before that. The beginning of a line, the line before that ends with a parenthesis, with the word ban, and this is Umihu hagoyrim lazeh, and who is the one that causes sheyeshave b'chinas kisei hanal, that this throne, that God should lower himself down to descend into the Garden of Eden these days, and eventually manifest himself fully and down here on earth as well. We're going to get to that later. And that the Ze'er Anpin, that means what we call HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the male side of God, not just a ray of him that's called the Shekhinah. Shekhinah is only a ray of God. But the Hashem himself, that's called as Ze'er HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or referred to as Ze'er Anpin, which means the emotions of God that are higher than creation. Who causes them to descend below? Leishev al hakisei, to sit on the throne, because who sits on the throne? The king is sitting on the throne, which is the God, as God already is in an image of a person, but yet a infinite man. He sits on the throne. So who causes him to sit down on the throne? Hu b'chinas shamayim, is heaven. So we understood it. It means our heaven. We pulled him. But now he adds another nuance. Our heaven triggers the divine heaven. And the divine heaven compels the supernal man that's lower than the divine heaven, that lives between heaven and earth. Where does the human live? Where does the physical human being, the earthly human being live? We live on top of planet Earth, between earth and heaven. And the space between, closer to earth, obviously, but between earth and heaven. Now, if we are created in the image of God, so there is in the supernal realms also the supernal man, which is not God in his essence, but it's God as he emanates himself into an image. That supernal man also lives underneath the supernal heaven. And what's the supernal heaven? It's the transcendental infinite light of God. Okay? So the Shekhinah is only a ray. Then there is the Hashem himself, but in a form, God himself as he's already contained in vessels, not a ray, but still as he is contained in vessels. And then there is the encompassing infinite light of God, unrestricted in vessels, beyond Sephirot, beyond attributes, and that's called Kasher, and it's also called Hashamayim. That. So what causes the supernal man, which is the Sephirot, the attributes that are infinitely higher than creation, even although they're attributes, but they're infinitely higher than creation, that they should sit down on a throne, or that he should sit down, he is they, because it's a configuration of 6 Sephirot, that he should sit down on that throne and funnel himself down to the world. We invited him with our heaven, but he needs his heaven to push him down. In other words, a higher level of the divine compels the lower level of the divine to descend down. Kasher, the crown, compels the Ze'er Anpin, the 6 emotions, to descend. Let's read it. V'sheyishpalu amidos lamata leishev al hakisei, to sit on the throne. U'b'chinas shamayim, that's the heaven. What does that translate as? That translates God's super will. His will compels his emotions to descend. Because the natural tendency of the emotions is to gravitate upward. That's their natural tendency. The supernal man above, his natural tendency is to look higher than himself, to gaze up to the infinite. He's not interested in descending downward onto the throne, into the silly creation. So he needs to be, something needs to charge him to do that. And who charges him to do that? The supernal will, which will is Keter, the crown. So that's the meaning. Hashamayim, the heavens compel him, Kisi, to sit down on a throne. Not that the heavens are the throne. The heaven is what pushes him down onto the throne. Which is the supernal will, blessed to see B'chinas Makif, which is the encompassing light, Al HaKelim, which is still a level of the energy that is above any container, any vessel. This level of God is not even containable or cannot enclose itself in any vessels. From there comes the push. From there comes the demand. From there comes the force, so to speak, Nimshach liyus b'chenes yeshiva. This is what causes the sitting, v'hashpalazu, and this descent. Now, why is that? This is where we stopped last week, and we continue. Ubira inyan, and the explanation of the matter is. So let's get a better understanding of what is this throne. We have to appreciate it metaphysically. This is not a throne, a physical throne. So what does it mean, a throne? So he explains. Ki akise, because the throne, hu aparsa, is the partition, namafsik ben atzilus labria. The throne is a partition, is a filter, a screen that separates between the world of emanation, which is divine, which is the realm of the godly, and the world of creation, which are the three lower worlds, which make up creation consciousness, a separate consciousness. So here you have now a partition, a barrier. Mafsik, it interprets. Now, we would think that the purpose of that filter is to block the revelation. That's what a filter does. It's a screen. It's placed, and it's true, it has that function. Externally, it's meant to, so to speak, cover on God's omnipresence, on God's exclusivity, block that truth from being revealed, diminishing the truth, so that creation can find its own space. That we should have a space to exist. Yes, that's one function of the filter. So the filter is meant to lessen the divine presence in the world. But on a much deeper level, the internal element of the filter is not meant as a block, but it's meant as a throne, which means a means through which he can actually descend into the creation. On the one hand, yes, it's a filter. But on the other hand, it's actually serving as a funnel. It's almost like if I wanted to take the water that's in this bottle and pour it into the cup. So this bottle, this bottle is not the best example because it's not such a big pail. But if it was a huge pail, imagine a much bigger pail, then I want to put it into the cup. Then and if I pour it, it wouldn't go into the cup because it's such a huge. The water is coming out from such a broad utensil that it would just pour out hugely, and most of the water would spill around and wouldn't even go into the cup. So what needs to be? It has to get narrow on the top, like you watch a bottle, narrow like this. When it's narrow like this, it's filtering, it's holding back, but the very holding back is allowing so this acts as an interface, as an enabler for it to descend. So the point over here is like this: for God to be able to translate himself into the creation, not just his projected lights. His lights, okay, the creations can handle that to a certain degree. But for something much more than that to come into the world, if God would come into the creation as is, creations would be destroyed instantly. And therefore, we couldn't. So that's the purpose of the throne, which the throne acts as a constrictor. It's almost like God is softening his impact through this throne. Like physically or chair, when a person is standing, they're far more forceful. Person is speaking, they're standing up, they're forceful. They're sitting down means they're softening. They're when a person is very angry and they really want to make a statement, they stand up and they shout, because then you're giving off yourself with your full force. Sitting down is already a softer stand. So God is, by sitting down, he's weak. He's diminishing his power so it could be handleable. So he sits on the throne, and then it can be transferred. The example that he's going to give is the example of the example. He's using the example of an example for this as this example. In other words, he's using the concept of a metaphor. When a teacher has an idea that is too lofty, too intense, too strong for the student to hear, and if the teacher would allow the idea that is as brilliant, as sharp, as strong as it is, as the teacher's mind can handle it, and the teacher would plug their mind directly into their students' minds and pass the idea right over to the student, they're going to fry the brain of their students. In other words, the students are going to be so burnt by the intensity of it, and they're probably not going to enjoy the lesson, and they're probably not coming back again. Just too much, too intense, too strong. So the teacher has an option. They can either not teach, or they can take subjects that are not as intense, and they can give that, which students can handle. But that's not the real devoted teacher, because the teacher wants to really teach the complete brilliance that they have, but they have to figure out a way in which they can teach such a brilliant idea without electrocuting the students, without overwhelming, without blowing the fuse of the student's mind. That's where the metaphor comes in. The metaphor is to take a very, very powerful idea and to camouflage it, to set it up in a certain screen with a certain filter. When it's coming to the student via the filter, it weakens it enough. It's condensing it and weakening it and making it palatable, so to speak, to the world of the student, that they're able to receive it. And eventually the student is able to actually remove the metaphor and get the internal element of it, and then have the mind of the teacher. But that's the point of the metaphor. So the throne, which is, as he explained earlier, is the partition, is God interfacing with the creation through metaphors. That's the concept of a throne. But here's the thing. Metaphors, a proper and a correct metaphor, is not easy to make. It's actually harder than the very conception of a concept. To be able to take the right and make a correct metaphor, and therefore only the wisest of the wise were creative in making the right metaphors. King Solomon, who we discussed many times, spoke 3,000 metaphors. Rabbi Meir would teach with 300 metaphors. So to be able to create a metaphor, you need to really, really, really understand something very, very deep. And so here comes out an amazing thing. The root and the source of the metaphor, which seems to be so external and so superficial because it's only a silly metaphor compared to the concept, the root of the metaphor is deeper than the idea that it's conveying. That's like the garment is really coming from a higher place than what it is garbing. So now we understand what we're saying earlier, that in order for the supernal man above to find himself a good metaphor and to descend onto that throne, which is the metaphor, it needs to come from a place higher than the supernal man above. It needs to come from the heavens above, from Kasher, which that's what provides where the metaphor comes from to allow the throne to happen. So, which the throne means this ability to be able to translate something through a camouflaging metaphor, but that creation of that itself is from a very high place. So now we understand Hashamayim Kisi, to create the Kisei, to create the throne, you have to reach Shamayim into your supermind. There is the mind and there is the supermind. The supermind creates the metaphors. That's why we always say that from the students, the teacher themselves becomes smarter, wiser. Why? Because the student forces the teacher to give metaphors. And when the teacher is forced to give a metaphor, the teacher must dig deep into their mind to levels of understanding that they never understood. Knows the teacher's conscious brilliance and conscious mind is external to what the teacher's deepest potential is. But the teacher needs a student that will who needs a metaphor that forces the teacher to extract the right metaphor. The teacher really needs to understand the concept on such a deep level. So the source of the throne is in the heavens. The throne itself is lower, but where does it come from? Like the metaphor is much lower. It's a silly story. You can't compare it with the deep idea that's being conveyed. But its source is from a higher place. So now let's read it inside. Because the throne, who aparsa, is the partition that interrupts and separates between the world of emanation and the world of creation, which in it, valyada, and through it, dafka, and precisely and only through it, yumshach liyos nimshach oira atzilus. This is what draws down that the lights of atzilus, the lights of emanation, should descend the bibriya into creation. Masha ein kain, which is the case, im lo haya parsa. If there wasn't this partition, lo haya efshe klal, it wouldn't be possible at all. Liyasis chabros atzilus bibriya, for the worlds of atzilus to connect to the worlds of creation. They would be worlds apart, and they could never communicate one with each other. And an example to the concept of Atzilus and Bria not being crossable, that the lights of Atzilus cannot descend into the range of creation. It's like a barrier that is not crossable, unbridgeable. Well, that existed in the world of Tohu. In the world of Tohu, which is a preliminary world, the world of chaos that came before the current system called the system of rectification, the world of Tikkun. So in the world of Tohu existed the concept of Atzilus, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya all existed in Tohu. Tohu is an entire realm in which kind of its entire original structure of creation, but in a chaotic way. And there, in that world, there was no passageway between Atzilus to Bria. Why? Because there was no throne. There was no interface. Why was there no interface? Because because of the extremeness. What's Tohu? Tohu is very extreme. Everything is felt to its intensity. A Tohu is a world of extremism as opposed to Tikkun, which is a world of compromise. So Tohu is a world of my way or the highway. So the lights of Atzilus, it's like a teacher or a person who's stubborn in the brilliance of the idea, and they want to demand the students, you better take it as it is. I'm not giving you a metaphor. Take it or leave it. Because the teacher feels like squeezing themselves in a metaphor is silly. They're frustrated. They don't want to do it. They're too extreme in the purity. They're purists. They want to keep the purity of it. They don't want to water it down. But that's at the cost of not being able to communicate. So it takes a humility to be able to. And then Tohu was a world of arrogance. I mean, not real arrogance. He's talking about a divine realm, but there was no compromise. And therefore, there was no the divine realm was not willing to compromise into a metaphor to be able to channel himself down to a lower world. God didn't want to put on miniature clothing. He wanted to remain in his full power. So there was no communication. Comes the world of tikkun and introduces the concept of a metaphor, and introduces the idea that you got to relax, you got to soften it, and then you can pass over. That's the tikkun. It's like in the world of Tayu, there was no connection, his chabrus of an attachment, the gilui atzilus, and the revelation of the atzilus of Tohu, never connected to the bria of Tohu, to the creation element of Tohu. In my recollection, and I can't say because I probably forgot so much, but in my recollection, I don't remember ever in all the Hasidus that I've taught all the years that I saw the concept that in Tohu there is Atzilus and Bria of Tohu. Chesed of Tohu, Spheros of Tohu, we always talk about. But that there is 4 worlds, and there is an Atzilus of, in Tohu itself, there is an Atzilus, a world of emanation, and a world of Bria. And this concept that these 2 realms didn't connect in Tohu, I don't recall seeing that anywhere. So many of these concepts they come around like a merry-go-round again and again and again and again and various different things. This particular concept I don't remember seeing. To me, it looks like it's an original concept in this mimer. But in order for, in the world of tikkun, in the world of rectification, in the current order, in order that there should be this attachment, so this requires the partition. It requires a self-screening, a self-limiting, which is, and what's that parsa? It's similar to a concept of a metaphor. And ukeinian, and where do we find that concept that the partition serves as a integration, to integrate? The Ukeinian, you find Vayave Moshe b'teicha anan. We find that Moshe goes up into the cloud. So what is that? What does it mean? Moshe when he went up to heaven, he went up through a cloud. What does he need a cloud for? Go to heaven. The point is, heaven means the divine. Moshe is in this world, in the realm of creation. So for a creation to go up into the divine, there needs to be the opposite. We're talking before, for the teacher to come down into the world of the student, there needs to be a metaphor. There needs to be a diminishment. Same is also for the student to rise into the world of the teacher. The student has to go through this interface state. Okay, and mashal, and this is similar to the metaphor, shaboy val yodo, the parable, the metaphor, shaboy with that metaphor, val yodo dafka, and only through the metaphor, efshala hasiga seichel, is it possible to comprehend an idea, a foreign idea, a lofty idea. And even though temporarily, when you're putting a brilliant, bright, spiritual concept, let's say, and you're using a physical example for it, temporarily you're darkening it, you're lessening it, it's not. So that's temporarily. But this is the only means, like we said earlier. You want to give water, you want a lot of water, but the only way to pour it from the big over here is that it got to go through the constrictor. Without the constrictor, without that little funnel on the pail, that little part, then it doesn't work. So it has to, in order to be able to give. This is the cause, or the reason through the medium of the mashal, of the metaphor, that one can comprehend. Mashal, which isn't the case when there isn't the metaphor. You can't grasp it at all. Imkaim comes out, the concealment of the metaphor, hu siba sagiloi. That itself is the siba, that itself is the cause of the revelation. The very concealment itself is the cause of the revelation. MS, and in truth, shayrish parsazu nimshach. Now that we know that we need the metaphor, now he's going to take the next step that we spoke earlier. that in order to create a metaphor, the metaphor itself has to come from a very, very high level in one's brilliance. Because without that, if you're understanding something superficially, you don't have you don't have metaphors for it. Usually the deepest people have, their qualities are that they can give metaphors. The root of this partition is derived from a very high place. Like says in the Maimer Torah Or, in the Maimer Vivdila HaParoicha, is beautiful because that's a Maimer in Parshas Lech Lecha. So even though we're not learning Torah Or, it's Parshas Lech Lecha now, but we got connected to the Maimer of Vivdila HaParoicha. Now I know why I stopped over here last week. I was really planning to go to the end because we needed to connect to Torah Or, Parshas Lech Lecha. It's a beautiful Maimer called Vivdila HaParoicha. I remember when I taught it back in the days of Beis Pitzal. In any case, there he's talking all about the bris milah, the circumcision, which has to do with the partition, and so on and so forth. And over there he explains how the source of the partition is higher than what it is partitioning for. V'zau inyan, and this is the idea of Hashemayim Kisi, that what can create the throne, which the throne, as we said before, is that metaphor. The throne is the interface. You need to go very high. You have to go above the one who sits on the throne. You have to go to the heaven, to the Keter element, and from there draw that down. Zau Hashemayim Kisi, Sha'al Yedei Shamayim, through heaven, which means the supernal heavens. But how do you get to the supernal heavens? How do you trigger that? You trigger that through your own heaven, which we said earlier means your supernal level of tshuva. Activating our highest point of our soul, our Yechidashe Benefesh, our deepest essential core, Shayidei Tshuvi Allah, through this higher teshuva, which is Ratzana Elyon, which is our higher will. When our will for God is not emanating from our minds, from our limited selves, but our will, desire for God is emanating from our core being, then that's called our supernal will. That triggers God's supernal will, which is what is necessary for the throne to be constructed. From there we draw forth the throne. And this is the meaning of Sailu l'roichev ba'aravois, a pasuk, a verse in Psalms, in Tehillim. I think Psalm 68. It says, Sailu, praise to the one who rides in the heavens. What does it mean he rides in the heavens? Just like a rider also sits on a horse. So what God's descent, and he's riding down into creation, that's what I think it would mean over here. God's descent to ride down. Sometimes this concept of sitting is also given the example that he uses horses to carry him down. Where is he doing? Aravos is one of the names for the heavens. So Solu, praise the one. What does it mean, praise? Stimulate that he should ride down in the heavens through activating your own heaven. And then you'll cause the throne to descend into the heaven. Because Shemoy in Ka is his name. Now Yud K itself is the higher letters of God's name. In other words, reaching very high in order to stimulate the heavens. Look in Ramaz, Sefer Ramosha Zakusi, a Pirush on the Zohar in Parshas Truma. Gam Yesh Loimar, we can also add and say, Be'inyan Hashamayim Kisi, regarding the heavens on my throne, based on what it says elsewhere in the explanation. On the verse in Parshas Emor, where it says, I will become sanctified amongst the Jewish people. When we say 3 times Kadosh, so when we do the Amida prayer, and we all rise to say the Kedusha. So this is one of the most loftiest moments during prayer. So we say 3 times, holy, holy, holy. We also say it actually in the prayer itself, in the blessings of the Shema, holy, holy, holy. So, and we're reciting what the angels say. The angels say, holy, holy, holy. So regarding the Zohar talks about what's the significance of the 3 times holy. So over there we learned that what Asher Hachadashim, the first time kadosh, the istalik vav, that is, the Zohar says, it's an energy of histalkus. It's an energy of ascent. Stalik over here means ascending light. What does that mean? That the vav, we say kadosh. Kadosh is spelled kuf dalid vav shin. There is kodesh and there is kadosh, which we learned many times. So kadosh with a vav, with the letter vav, means that the power of the vav is the 6 emotions of God, called Hakadosh Baruch Hu. That's why it's called kadosh. Let's translate it into the way we were talking about this today. The man, the supernal man above, is called kadosh. The configuration of Sfirot, the Ze'er Anpin, God as he contains himself in vessels. However, when that energy rises higher and reaches up to the heaven above it, in other words, when the Ze'er Anpin wants to go into the Erech Anpin, when there is an elevation, the energy that is contained in vessels soars upward out of the vessels to reach all the way into the infinite. It's rising upward. That's the idea of istalik. So it's, in a sense, a journey away from creation, away from containers, away from heaven and earth, away into the infinite self, into the infinite heights. So it says, the istalik vav raza de shemayim Elohim. The supernal heavens are rising upward, le'ela, higher and higher. That's the first kadosh. So the first kadosh is a retraction, not a projection, but a retraction. God is pulling himself in, higher, away. But why would we want that? The answer is, what's triggering that is really our yearning to break out of our constraints. We spoke earlier, this supernatural love, the super rational love, the fire of the soul, the tshuva of our soul, the rapture of our soul, that we can't bear the constrictions anymore. We just want to melt into God's infinity. That energy causes above also that same energy to rise up. But the reason for it is the purpose is not the escape, the removal. The purpose is to stimulate the descent from a much higher place. And from that higher place, there is the infusion. There is the flow of the infinite light, more potent and more stronger than ever before, but to descend down, like we spoke earlier about Hashem going down onto the throne, descending. So there we learn like this. The first kadosh is meant to trigger. Ulabasar, and then afterwards, nahar, that light that has retracted and run up to the highest place. Now it's submerged in the infinite. Now it reemerges refreshed, reinvigorated, far more intense, recharged, back. And afterwards, that supernal light illuminates outward. Where to? Al Kursayu, onto the throne. This idea. First we have to trigger the transcendence, trigger the infinite, and then the purpose is not, however, just shaking it up there. The purpose is to direct it down. And that's the second time Kadosh. The Iyu Shamayim, we bring him down onto the throne, which the throne is called heaven. So that's Hashamayim Kisi. The throne is, the heavens are my throne. Ukedain Ikri Kadosh, and now he's called holy with a Vav. That means that the Vav is no more in a state of ascendance, but in a state of down. but it has within it the energies of transcendence, the energies of the higher lights. It's descending now down. Ayin Sham. And over there it's explained. Pidish this talig vav, that the vav departs. Zeu inyan. This is the concept. What does this mean that the vav departs? This is the concept that we trigger within ourselves a desire to depart our constraints, to depart our limited selves, our constricted selves, this is the idea of Mesiris Nefesh, of our Mesiris Nefesh, our giving ourselves over, dissolving ourselves in God's unity. And through this nimshach, and what does this cause? Liyos yichud ava, to bring about, we know, it's a mystical concept of Arizal, that when we say Shema Yisrael, Hear O Israel, and we have in mind and we experience it with Mesiras Nefesh, which means this desire to like just be one with the infinite oneness, and go and even leave our bodies. That's the idea. We give ourselves, or we melt ourselves back into our source. What does that cause? That's what triggers a unity between Chachma and Bina. What's Chachma? Chachma is a state of existence, a state of divine energy that's not yet in vessels. Like in our own minds, a flash of light, not really processed yet. It's above the vessels. Bina is already understanding, that's containers and vessels. In order to connect God and to awaken the transcendental infinite lights of Chachma. Now, we discussed this many times. Whenever there's a unity of Chachma and Bina, the target is not Chachma. What we really mean is Chachma as it connects to Keter, as it connects to the deeper element of Keter, as it connects to Atik Yomin, the Ancient of Days, as it connects to Reisha del Radla, Reisha del Izgang, the head that's not revealed, as it goes higher and higher, all the way into the infinite light before the Tzimtzum, all the way up into Atzmus Mamish, to the essence of God. The point over here is to capture everything, to awaken, to stir, to bring down Hashem himself, and then connect that with vessels. But in order to stir the pot, you need a zinger. And the zinger is our eruption, our desire. So that's the first kadosh. It's the violent, you might say, a rapture of the soul to break free from the body, to completely reject the constrictions, to free itself up from all this darkness. By a day Zen, only that nimshach yichud ava brings the unification of father and mother. Lias nimshach or chadash, and that brings new light into creation. It brings light that's from outside the spiritual cosmos, because you're bringing something new. You're bringing infinity into the world. You're not staying within the box. You're taking from what's outside the box. Nimtza comes out, P'china Shamayim, that the heaven, which is the first kadosh, Shayach l'tshuva ilah, that has a connection to the higher teshuva, because that's what it means, the higher teshuva. The higher teshuva is a reabsorption of self into the infinite. Ella, so that's Shamayim. But then, what does it have to cause? It has to cause the opposite. That's good as a trigger. You're not supposed to leave it over there, because the point over here is not to be reabsorbed in the infinite. The point of it is to bring the infinite down here. Ella, but rather shepchines kisui. When we say the heavens are my throne, it means now that transcendent light should sit down on the throne, should convey itself, should descend into the world. When the light then is drawn down from up down into the world. Look at the verse. Shemayim Mesaprim Menahari Umenatzitzi. Sparkle and shine. I didn't look up the Zohar, so I can't tell you. Ayin Oid B'Zohar Chadash Alav Vayechi Al Pasik Hayoshvi B'Shemayim al kursaya di ikra shamayim, that Hashem sits on his throne that is called shamayim. I'm ashakasav divra maschel hamagbi l'shaves lapiza efshel farish oid. Based on this, we can explain more b'mashakasav. Now going back to Adam and Chava, Adam and Eve, that were placed into the Garden of Eden in order to stimulate this stimulation. That's why God created them. And that's why God put them in the garden. Because as we said earlier, the garden is a beneficiary only of the light, a ray of the Shekhinah. If you want to bring God himself there, that requires man's work. Tshuva, which comes from the lowest world. And Adam and Chava were placed in Gan Eden to do this. However, now based on that, the Apiza Efshel Farish Oit. So based on this, the Tzemach Tzedek says. By the way, this is all that we're learning so far today. Besides the first few lines that we learned at the beginning, is all the commentary or the footnote, if you might say, of the Tzemach Tzedek. Apiza Efshel Farish Oit b'Masha Kosev Vayita Hashem Elokim Gan be'Eden Mikedem. We can understand that there's a certain redundancy or there's a certain repetition that we find in the verse. What's the repetition? In one verse it says, God planted a garden in Eden. Vayeshev Sham es Adam, and he sat man down over there. He sat the human being, he sat the man, the human into, he settled him. He settled the human into the garden. Now, a few verses later, it says, Vayikach es Adam, Hashem took man, Vayenicheyu began Eden, and he placed him in the Garden of Eden. So hold it, you told us already earlier, Vayasem Sham es Adam, and he placed man over there. And now it says again, God took the human and he put him there. So why twice? Based on what we're learning now, we can understand that it's not referring to the same man. Beautiful idea. The second time it says that God took Adam and he put him there, it's referring to the human Adam. He went and he put him in the Garden of Eden. But the first time it's not talking about Adam and Eve. It's talking about the supernal man. God initially placed the supernal man, the divine being, he put him in the garden. Now hold it, didn't we say earlier that we need to do the work on our own to make that happen? That doesn't happen by God. The answer is, if God doesn't do something once, we can never do it. He's got to do it once. And after he does it once, he lets us take over. So the first thing when God created the garden, he right away wanted to let us know that he's not interested in this garden just being powered by his emanations. He wants to be there. So he took the supernal man, which is really himself, and he placed him in the garden. Then he said, listen here, I'm here, but only temporary. I'm leaving, never to come back again, God forbid, unless you bring me in. So in order for you to bring me in, let me show you how to do it. So he takes, for that reason, he goes and he brings the human being down here and he puts him into Gan Eden, and everything that the human being down here is going to do through the Torah and the mitzvahs, through the heaven and the earth in the human, through his service, especially the heaven in the human, the human being serving God with love, he's going to bring the supernal man to continuously visit the Garden of Eden. That's the repetition. That's why the Torah says it twice. Two different stories. The question he asks over here, Ukefel Inyan, this seems to be a repetition. Shekvar Nemar, it says already, Vayasim Shamas Adam, that he placed the human being over there. Ache Inyan, the idea is the Mavu b'makam acher. It's stated elsewhere, Al Pasuk, in the blessings we make by a wedding are 7 blessings. And we say, Samach te Samach, Re'em Ahuvim. This friends, this couple who love each other, Re'em Ahuvim, rejoice. Like the one who formed you, brought you joy in the Garden of Eden. So that's one of the blessings we say. Rejoice now, and just like God was the one who brought you joy in the Garden of Eden. The deeper meaning is simply it's just like God brought about, facilitate the first wedding. So now we continue our weddings, and we should try to recognize we're supposed to have joy, and God made that wedding very joyous. So we should also make it joyous. Kind of that's the blessing. The deeper meaning is that our human marriages should reflect the divine marriage that took place in Gan Eden on the supernal level. It's not referring to Adam and Eve. It's referring to the supernal man and the supernal woman, Hashem and the Shekhinah getting married in Gan Eden. God's marriage. And now God says, you two get married, and by you, physical, mortal human being, and your wife, and you treat your wife with the right dignity and respect, and she treats her husband with the right thing, and you live a harmonious, peaceful existence, your marriage is going to facilitate that and create and stimulate the supernal marriage between HaKadosh Baruch Hu and the Shekhinah. It's happening on two worlds, on two realms. So in the same way, it's over here as well. We see the Torah repeating the story twice of the man going to Gan Eden. So, just like in the beginning of the creation of the world, God was self-motivated. Just like creation in its, what sparked creation? Spark creation wasn't us because we didn't exist to spark it. God had to spark it himself. But then God relies on us. We know every Rosh Hashanah. It's our work to re-engage him and re-stimulate him. So he does it. First it's from above, and then it's dependent on us. The same is also in the Garden of Eden as well. That his presence, the first visit, he did on his own. So, this is what it means. It says in the beginning, he placed over there, doesn't say, it's interesting, it says, that's why it doesn't say God placed over there the man that he made. It says he placed the man that he formed. Making is referring to the human, the physical human, because we exist in the world of Asiya, in the world of action. The man that he formed is a higher man, the supernal man. It's like he formed himself into a man. So the supernal man, Bereishis. That's why it doesn't say Asher Asa. Al derech yotzer or, like we say, he forms light. We're talking about supernal lights. We're not talking about we're talking about a man of light, a godly being. Then comes the next verse. The next verse that says that God took the person and he put him in Gan Eden. That's referring to the human man down here, the earthly human. God put him into the Garden of Eden, to work the garden, and to guard the garden, which means that from now on, now God wants us to activate it through mitzvahs and through our love to him, and as we discussed earlier, how we activate this. Kitzer, now this now does a summary. This is the meaning of the heaven. What does heaven mean? Tshuva. Heaven inside of us is this powerful love that's called tshuva. The love of the Baal Tshuva, the fiery love. Mamshech Kisi. That's what draws down the throne, which is the concept of Atik Yoimim Yosef. The Ancient of Days sits down. What does a throne mean? That the Ancient of Days, meaning God himself, sits down. We learned about this last week. And even though most closest to us, the sitting down is taking place in this air anpin, in the small face, in the levels of the divine that's constraint already in vessels, but really it's reverberating much higher, all the way up in Atik Yom, in the Ancient of Days, that he too is sitting down. The sitting is, it's l'roichei baravos. And what does the sitting down mean? That he rides in the heavens. The heavens cause him, that's the heaven, the tshuva is what drives him down. And then God places man over there. Okay, so now that we understand what heaven is, remember the mimer is based on the concept that there is the heaven that there is today. There is the earth that there is today. And then there's going to be the new heaven and the new earth that's going to come in the time of Mashiach. So we're still exploring what is the heaven of today. So we find out that it's more than just the blue sky and the earth. It's referring to this incredible phenomenon of our unbelievable ability that we have to create the right heaven to be a throne for God. But what's the earth? So the idea is that through our heavenly yearnings and our spiritual quests, reaching into the deepest yearning of the soul, we do draw God down into creation, into Gan Eden, and into the spiritual worlds, and maybe into our soul. But that's not the ultimate desire. That's not the ultimate purpose. The ultimate purpose is to bring it all the way down to earth. For that, to bring it into the next stage, to bring it down into the material physical world, for that, it's not enough that we activate our heaven, we have to activate our earth. Now, heaven sounds very exciting to activate. What does it mean to activate earth? Earth is our humility. And which context of our humility? The context of the humility is that we lower ourselves down to do all the chores that God gives us to do, that maybe are not as exhilarating and as spiritually electrifying and as exciting. God gives us responsibilities. God wants us to take care of such and such. God wants us to do physical mitzvahs. They're not as we don't trip out on them like we're talking about these fantastic spiritual, what's it called again? Meditative journeys. We're talking about daily responsibility, helping people, doing good in the world. Sometimes doing mitzvahs that we have no desire. And why do we do them? Because we're humbled before God. And if it's God's will, we do it. So when we lower ourselves down so much, it's the opposite of the excitement, the fervor, the melting into God. The melting into God is hitting the gas. The humility that we're talking about is hitting the brakes. You control your spiritual appetites and desires, and you focus your energy downward into the world. That humility causes God to be humble as well. And he descends not only to heaven, he comes all the way down to earth. He puts his feet down on the earth. And that's what the verse says. The earth is my footstool, where God puts his feet. That means he lowers himself down, down, down. But we need to channel that down. We're responsible for everything. That's the point. In order to draw down the heaven, that heaven should be God's throne. That comes through our desire for God, like a woman desiring her husband. This comes from our feminine waters. This is all our might, all of our yearning. We're being driven crazy with desire for God. Which is called the Ratzo. Ratzo means the racing of our excitement. That we are from below upward, which means we are seeking to break the constraints and the constrictions and to soar upward into the infinite. But the idea that the earth is my footstool, that's the opposite. That's the descent. The descent downward into which means by us, it means it's not our right side related to the right side of our soul, but the left side of the soul, which is the power of constraint, which also is the power of harshness. We got to be harsh on ourselves. In which sense? We lower ourselves down. We deflate our spiritual egos. And we say, what? You want to melt into God? You want to crash into God? Who do you think you are? Go stand in the back of the line. Kind of that understanding. Who do you even think you are? That's the humility that throws us back. We become intimidated by his greatness and we move back. And you say, that's no good. No, we need both. We need the propelling that pushes us forward, and we need the constraint that puts us back. One lowers themselves down to say, Mi anochi, who am I? Asher avai, that I should come, liskari v'lamelech, to step close to the king. V'yarei megeshes elov, and you tremble and you fear from stepping close. B'pchines yiru pachad, with awe and with dread. Like it says, Vayad ha'am vayanu'u, the people saw by the giving of the Torah, and they saw the awesome light. So, notwithstanding the fact that on the one hand they were so excited to race up the mountain, or to allow their souls to come to depart their bodies and to melt into Hashem, yet it says, the verse says, the people saw vayanu'u, they trembled. And therefore, vayamdu marachok, they held back and they stood at a distance. It was as a counter force to their excitement. They had an opposite, dread and a fear. And as a result of that, what does that mean? Doesn't mean you'll leave the palace, goodbye, you go home. It means you accept upon yourself the yoke of heaven. The accept upon themselves the yoke of heaven. The yoke of heaven means even when it's not exhilarating to serve God, even when it's not giving me goosebumps, it's not giving me the butterflies in my stomach, I'm not experiencing like the tingling in my hands and feet. But I'm devoted. I'm a devoted servant. Whatever God wants of me, I'm doing. Sometimes it's boring. Sometimes it's I would rather be doing something else, but I do it anyways because of commitment, because I surrendered myself completely to what I should be doing, whatever God wants me to do in this world. We accept upon ourselves the yoke of heaven, with fear, upachad and dread, like it says. One of the commandments in the Torah is that we should appoint a king. Appoint upon yourself a king. What that means is appoint God as your authority. So God is not only this awesome being to melt into, he's also an authoritative figure that we listen to. Through this type of an arousal, since everything in heaven is dependent on us, so therefore, when we have this type of an arousal, not of love, but of dread and of fear, the Kabbalah's Oil Malchus Shemayim, accepting the yoke of heaven, which causes us to stay focused on our mission down here in the world, that we lower ourselves down, we fear from stepping close, and we accept upon ourselves oil mitzvahs, the yoke of the mitzvah of the commandments. So simultaneously and correspondently, we cause above in the same manner. We cause God to also be humble, and that he should lower himself down also into this world, into the physical dynamics of this world. And that's really awesome. That God himself descends into the physicality of this world, tachtainim gashmiyim, into the material things of this world, to sanctify and make this world holy. And eventually we will see that light. Hainu b'maisa hamitzvahs gashmiyim. And how does God descend into this world? When we do a physical mitzvah, not only us doing the mitzvah, Hashem is present, and Hashem is now fully vested and enclosed in something physical. And this is what it means. God says, Va'aret, and the earth. That means when you behave like earth, humble like earth, everybody steps on earth. Earth is like, right? You lower yourself down to the earth. What does that cause? Hadayim ragli, you bring my feet down. And I put my feet down on earth. I step down on earth. I extend myself all the way into the physical. This is measure for measure. Just like we descend ourselves, that we should be in a state of fear, which is merachik, which is from a distance. The same is also he lowers the nimshach momaila and is drawn from above. Oir v'giloy, light and revelation, binyanim gashmiyim, in material things, b'mitzvahs ma'asiyos, in through our physical mitzvahs that we do. V'zau, and this is the meaning, v'ha'aretz, and the earth. Earth means humility, but earth in particular also relates to accepting God's kingship. That's called earth. Why is accepting God's kingship called earth? Because the attribute of malchus, of kingship above, is the divine earth. Keter, the crown, is the divine heaven. And the lowest sphere is the divine earth. Malchus is called earth. So when we acknowledge kingship and we submit to kingship, then we're activating the earth itself. And that's the earth. It's the acceptance of the yoke of heaven, which causes us, it causes us to stay focused on our responsibilities and to return into our vessels. Hanal, and that is Adayim Ragli. That's where God can place his feet. I'm in Hashemayim Kisi Berabis Boy, Resh Pesh Yitzayin, Mishpatim, the Taich Perik Lamedal, B'chu Koisai, Resh Perik Lamed Vav, Nasir Resh Perik Yud Beis. Hine, Kol Zeu Ata, now that we have an idea what means heaven and earth, our heaven and earth. Through our heaven and earth, we're really attaching God to the world today. Not just his rays, but he himself. We're enriching through heavens, we're enriching the Gan Eden. One day we'll experience all that light. And through our earth, our acceptance of the yoke of heaven, we're touching God down onto earth. However, after we are done doing our part in creating a heaven and an earth for God, giving him a throne and giving him a footstool to sit down and also to put his feet all the way down, we give him both. God says, once you do it and you're done, then I'm going to do my part. I'm going to give you a heaven and an earth. But my heaven and earth is just going to follow yours. And boy, oh boy, is that going to be a heaven and an earth so much more powerful than what you've created. But if God then will give us a much higher heaven and earth, would we think that our heaven and earth that we created then will look silly? It's almost like we've worked so hard and we've created the heaven and the earth for God, and and God comes and he sits there for a little bit, and then he says, but now let me show you what I can do. And he'll give us, although it'll be unbelievably more incredible, as we'll soon see why, but it's a little bit insulting to us. Because he's saying, you guys can only do baby, little toys. I can do the real thing. So that's why the verse is going to say in the end that our toy heaven and our toy, or our miniature heaven and earth that we've created, although we realize now it's not so miniature, it's huge, but yet it's called minuscule compared to what God does. God says, I will never dismiss that. I will always keep that in my window. And it will always be before me, because that's really what excites me more even than my heaven and my earth. Not only that, I will take your heaven and your earth, and I will integrate it into my heaven and my earth. That means it will forever, ever, ever, in the infinite days of Mashiach, when we will be going into such crazy lights and such crazy revelations, we will always feel that it's connected to what we've created with our small heaven and earth. Because our heaven and earth will be enmeshed into the ultimate heaven. That's why God says, we'll see in the end of the verse, I want to put that out now. Now we're going to learn how God's heaven and earth is like, whoa, way above ours. So we should expect like some spectacular stuff happening way beyond, but yet it won't dwarf our work and mitigate it and make our work be meaningless. Our work will always stand and always be special and forever be noticed, acknowledged, and recognized as what triggered everything, as we shall see. And it calls all of this u'ata is now shashefa shalamayla, that the influence from above nimsheches is drawn ayidei alosman, all the divine flow into the cosmos, whether above and eventually down to earth, like we discussed earlier, to the heaven, to the earth, is all being stimulated through we're the ones pulling the lever. We're the ones downloading it. We are pumping the pump. It's our work. And that's called the raising of the feminine waters. And we're doing the arousal from below, which, because after everything is said and done, it's being done by us, it has a certain limitation. Which, being that God is reciprocating to us, therefore his reciprocation is to a certain degree measured by how powerful ours is. So there's a limit, because he's responding to us. So it's with a limit. According to the quality of our service, of our raising of feminine waters. He loves us back based on our love. He's reciprocating. So is the arousal from above. And the drawing of mad stands for mad, masculine waters. Mad stands for mayan duchrin, masculine waters, which means we are stimulating the love, and he is the man who is being stimulated by our advances to him, our desires to be close to him. That's what's pulling him in. And being that we are still small, so then even when we're bringing him in and he's who he is, it's still with a certain limitation. And where is that felt? Didn't we say that we're getting God himself? If we're getting God himself, why is that limited? Yeah, you know why? Because on the heavens it says is his throne. When a person sits down, yet he's lowering himself down, but what part is kind of going on the throne is back. Which means even though we're getting him, we're getting his back. But his front, which means his side of him that's facing him, not down, is not revealing itself yet. Even in Gan Eden, and even with all the lights that are taking place up there because of what we do today and lighting up the Gan Eden, it's God's back. It's like Hashem says to Moshe, you'll see my back and not my front. Emphasized in the concept that it says Hashemayim Kisi, the throne, the heavens are my throne. I know Inyan Hashemayim Kisi. Shuhu, what does that mean? It's happening through our Shemayim, through our desire. Va'aretz Hadoim, and the earth is his footstool. Shuv b'chinas shuv, that's our shuv. And he's going to say this idea that it's the back in a moment. He's going to get to it. I thought he's saying it over here. He's going to say it soon. Avala asad lavoi, but in the future, when we enter into the 7th millennium, which is it's just a little over 200 years from now, that doesn't mean that Mashiach comes then. That's already post-Mashiach. That's the era after Mashiach, when God is really going to accelerate his light and his presence in this world. At that point, the system of the 6 day, and that's like going into Shabbos. So the system of the 6 days, where we're the ones who are producing the heaven and the earth, God says, now you rest. Now I'm doing the heaven and the earth. But in the future, in the 7th millennium, that's going to be the time of the main reward. In other words, the primary time for reward for all of our efforts is not in paradise, is not in Gan Eden. In Gan Eden, God is throwing a little nash to keep us busy. He's throwing bags of chips, He's keeping, we said earlier, God is coming down, but it's external. A little candy. The real revelation and the real reward is going to be on earth. When? In the 7th millennium. That's why there's going to be the resurrection. All souls come down here. So on that time, it says, Ksiv, about that era is where it says in the same Haftorah, where it says Hashamayim Kisi in Isaiah, I forgot which chapter, where it says Hashamayim Kisi, that the heavens are my throne and the earth is it's somewhere in chapter 60 something. I think it's the last, if I'm not making a mistake, it's the last chapter in Isaiah, in Yeshaya. So over there, it says, in the beginning, it begins, the heavens are my throne and the earth is my footstool. And in the end, it says, like the new heavens that I am creating. That means God is saying, you're not creating it, I'm creating. And therefore, it's going to be completely on a divine scale, not on God reciprocating to us. Like when the new heavens, and the new earth, and the emphasis over there in the verses, that I am making them. And why is that heaven better or greater? Because instead of it being the throne where you put only the back, the verse says, those heavens and those earths is going to stand before me. Before me also can mean it's going to stand and I will reveal my inside. Lefanai means in front of me, but it also means my internal self. Me as I really am, not me as I'm projecting outward. They stand before me. Pirish ani oisa oisam ba'atzmi. I am going to make that heaven myself, God says. Bilti yesrusa delatata, not depending it on your arousal from below. She'ein magia l'sham chenes yesrusa delatata. Our arousal from below is not touching over there, is not reaching over there, is not stimulating over there. It's that God himself makes them without our arousal at all. Hashem is going to do it. And because he is going to do them, they're not limited in any way. And therefore, those heaven and earth, where we're going to be invited into that heaven and earth, Hashem is going to, what's going to be with that oimdim, they stand before him. His inner self will reveal itself there. Well, the Maila, it is above the B'chinas Hashemayim Kisi, from the heaven being a throne. Shahare, why? A throne is also, he's there. No, this is what we were saying earlier. On a throne, on a chair, is only the back of a person. Who sits on the throne. It can know that, and obviously God is not a body. So what do you mean sitting his back is front? It means as we know that even in the supernal level of will, which is Kasher, the crown, is the external part of the crown and the internal. Like we learned about it many times, the terminology that we learn in Kabbalistic terminology, Erech Anpin, the long face, which is the external part of the crown. Atik Yom, an ancient of days, which is the internal element. So this element of the atik, of the inside, has never been tapped. That's not revealed in the sitting down. That's going to be the new heavens. Like it says in the mimer, the Etzlei Omen. Vilochein, and therefore, and that's why regarding the new heaven and the earth, it says, they're standing in front of me. And since we're going to be going into somewhere infinitely deeper and higher, income in unmeasurably higher, because God is going to do it and God is going to take us on a ride. For that reason, it says in the future that who's going to lead us into that time? Mashiach Tzidkenu, the righteous Mashiach, Messiah, Mashiach. And regarding Mashiach, what does it say? Hine yaskil avdi, behold, my servant will be wise. Yadom, he will be elevated. Vinisa, and he's going to be, no, Yadom is going to be exalted. Vinisa, he's going to be elevated. V'gava ma'oid, he's going to be very high. The leader of the Jewish people, Mashiach, he's going to, listen to these words. He will reach Yaskel, he will reach the highest intelligence. He's going to be exalted. He's going to be elevated higher than exalted and very high. And he's not in the Mashiach being so high, higher than anybody, higher than any period, higher than any, including Moses, higher than literally everybody, incomparably high. But the point of him being so high is not for himself, so that he can take us into that incredible revelation. So the Alter Rebbe says, "Sheyis alu kol ha'olamos." I love this mimer because it talks about Mashiach so beautifully. Sheyis alu kol ha'olamos. All the worlds will be elevated. Ad b'chinas ma'od ha'avaya. To the verses to very, very high. I know, but what is the emphasis? He's going to be elevated to ma'od, a high, a very high. Wow. So if you remember earlier, we said, how do we stimulate in general God's transcendence? How do we trigger the infinite? So we said earlier, we need to display our infinite. How do we display our infinite? When we tap our own heaven, which we discussed earlier, means this super rational love. Fine. How is that expressed in prayer? You will love God, your God, with all your heart. That's not it. With all your soul, it's all your powers of your soul. That's not it. With all your might, that means with your entire being. And how do you say might in Hebrew? With all your might. Through our service of God coming from all of our might, ma'od, from our might, because that's infinite, our essence of our soul, that's infinite. In the words that he used earlier, Hachadashim benefesh, the transcendence parts of our soul, the highest, and through that we draw down the infinite. What does it say regarding Mashiach? That ma'od that we've always known, that Hachadashim benefesh that we've always known, is going to be on steroids. What does that mean? Yask v'gava ma'od. The ma'od is going to be lifted up. That means that our might that we're going to is going to accelerate to such crazy levels of, in other words, even Hachadashim benefesh that we have now, which we think is like the highest yearning you can have from God. Imagine God infusing energy into that and pumping it to like levels that we have. Literally, God literally like powering that with infinite divine power, so that we can yearn for him with yearnings that are just unfathomable. That's the meaning. V'gava ma'od. The ma'od that you've had, the ma'od itself, the very much of your soul, is going to shoot up to unimaginable heights. So if our heaven is going to be so much higher, so in a sense, even though we're saying that God is doing it, it's still we're going to be doing it. But we're doing it not from within ourselves. We're doing it because he is doing, he will rev up our engine. He's going to press on the gas in our own soul. So of course we're going to be activating it, but we're activating it by him pressing on the pedal, not us pressing on the pedal. And therefore this trigger is going to be on levels, and therefore the response to that. So it's considered that he is doing it, not we're doing it. And that's the meaning. V'gava ma'od. What we have now as when we peek out at our ma'od, this ma'od is nothing, because this is the ma'od of the neshama. This is the super powers of the soul as it is today. But the superpower of the soul, after Mashiach comes, Mashiach himself is going to accelerate our ma'od exponentially. And that is kimavur l'mayla. It is explained above. Hear these amazing words. Partition inyan shamayim, and the explanation of what does it mean heaven. Which means it's all your might. Tshuva, it's the higher tshuva. Pchinas makif. It's the super encompassing powers of the soul that are triggered. And we're working with our capacity of super rational energy. Okay, however, v'gava ma'od. What does it mean? The v'gava ma'od, ma'od. The ma'od that we're going to experience then is going to be mimadrega hagavoya yoser harbe. To me, from a level way above what we have today. Mimadregas bechinas b'chol ma'odecha. It's going to be on the highest level, or from any type of b'chol ma'odecha that we've ever known. Way beyond anything. And here, look at these brackets. Gavalt, I love it. Shebchinas b'chol ma'odcha, because the parentheses now. Shebchinas b'chol ma'odcha, because our b'chol ma'odcha that we said earlier, that we've been speaking about the whole discourse, our excitement for God, our super rational excitement to God, triggered by being distant and far and frustration, all this. Where is it coming from? It's coming from, remember we said 5 powers to the soul, 5 names to the soul. And this is coming from the highest name of the soul, from our Yechida. But in the future, Yimshachu Neshamis Chadashis. In the days of Mashiach, we're going to be visited by new souls. New souls. Souls that have never been part of the human experience. Newborn souls are going to be born with a capacity, that is I don't know, not a million times more, exponentially more than any soul that we've ever had. You know why? Because they were never part of Adam's soul. All the souls that we have from beginning of time till now were all part of Adam Arishon's neshama. These are souls from outside of Adam. And therefore they're infused with godliness. These souls will come down into the world and they will create energies. Now, it doesn't mean that they're going to just do it themselves. They're going to grab us along for the ride. We have to expect certain types of tzaddikim that are going to be born after Mashiach is here, Not just Mashiach himself, of course, Mashiach, but tzaddikim that are going to be born in the world, that are going to make all the tzaddikim we've ever known look like higher level, new souls. New souls, their oneness with God is higher than the level called Yechida. Sheba Adam Arishan. Adam Arishan had 5 levels of soul. His Yechida was the highest Yechida, and only the biggest tzaddikim are rooted in his Yechida, such a deep, deep, high level. And yet the new souls of the future are going to be higher than Adam Arishan's even Yechida. As stated in the book of Gilgulim from the Arizal. Reish Perish Shvi, the beginning of the 7th chapter. Let's take a look at the origins in the Ari. V'da, you should know, ki yashnei minei neshamas, says the Arizal. There are 2 types of souls. By the way, I'm just letting you know over here, this information we're teaching tonight is the coolest information. So if you're privy to be at this class, you have some really cool knowledge. This is the stuff that because not too many people get to the end of this red book. You understand? This is like the mimer at the end of Shir Hashirim. Like, come on, who's learning this? So, just letting you know. There's 2 types of souls. One of them, those that are part of Adam's neshama, the bays, and the second type of neshamas, are those souls that are not part of Adam Arishon. And these souls are much higher, and far. Ma'ulim means of far higher stature. Mikol haneshama shenichlu ba'adam arishon. All the souls that are part of Adam Arishon, they're of a different breed completely. And therefore, their capacities are levels that we don't even know. Their divine capacity. Now, the Alter Rebbe was one of these souls. That's why he turned Judaism on its head. That's why he completely introduced the most radical, novel ideas like has never been in Judaism. We say about the Alter Rebbe, he was a new neshama. He's from these. So these neshamas, they start appearing at the end of exile. And mainly after Mashiach comes, is when they will really pop up everywhere. And like we explained in the first chapter, wait, so when he says the first chapter, he doesn't mean in this discourse. This is still the Arizal talking. In the book of Incarnation, the Arizal says, like we explained in the first chapter, that Adam's neshama, koleles, includes minefesh ta'asiyah. It includes all the souls from the level of nefesh, which is the lowest level of soul, because there's 5 names to the soul: nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. So nefesh is the lowest. And within each, and these 5 levels exist in each world: Asiya, Yetzira, Bria, and Atzilus. So Adam's neshama included all the souls from the lowest level of the world of Asiya to the highest level of the world of Atzilus. But these are all the current souls, including the greatest mystics, rabbis, tzaddikim, and everybody. Min nefesh ta'asiyah ad yechida da'atzilus, until the yechida of the world of Atzilus. Kain oisam haneshamis shaloi nichlalu ba'adam arishan. But those neshamis that were not included in Adam Arishan, and al derech zeh, they're higher and completely above. Now, what's going to happen in the 7th millennium? Ube'elaf hashvi, in the 7th millennium, yis'atru elu haneshamis shenichlalu ba'adam arishan ba'oisen haneshamis hayosei gevayeh. Our souls, the souls that are of part of Adam's soul, are going to be crowned with those other souls. In other words, we're going to get a hookup to those souls. We're going to like hitch up with them. These souls are going to serve as elevators for the lower souls. And they're going to invite us into that level of experience. They're going to take us along for the ride. Mehem. So how are we going to match up? Kol chelik v'chelik em adoim aloi. There are those futuristic souls, our souls. Yet there is a similarity in the sense that this is nefesh, clicks with that nefesh. This is neshama, clicks with that nefesh. In general, those souls are a whole different level, but yet it's still within the structure. So the nefesh of this will connect to the nefesh of those, and as a result of that, they will lift. Well, really, this shouldn't be such a novelty to you what I'm saying right now, because we learned a class a few months ago called being eaten by the souls of the future. Remember, we said that those souls of the future will eat us, just like we eat the animal. We explained it doesn't mean eating in the regular sense, but it means that we will be integrated into them, assimilated into them. Look in the discourse where we speak about, it says, V'achaltem, you will eat achel, the one who eats. Today's days, we eat the animal. And then which in other words, the eater will become the eaten. We will be uplifted by those. Bereishis, Parsha Aleph. So you understand now, those souls will create the new heaven and the new earth. But didn't God say, I'm going to create it? As we said earlier, those souls are not considered separate from God at all. You should be considered, there's me and there's a you, there's God, and they're just an extension of Hashem in this world. They're even deeper than Yechida. Yechida means one with God, even higher than that. Their oneness is so perfect. So it's called God making it. They are God. It's one. So now in Midrash Rabbah, Bereishis, Parsha Av, Rav Huna b'Shem Rabbi Lezer ben Oisha Rabbi Yosef Glili Amar, Rav Huna, in the name of Rabbi Lezer ben Oisha, the son of Rabbi Yosef Glili, says, Afilu oisan shekasav behem ki hineni boire shamayim chadashim. Even those that it says about them that I am creating a new heaven. So we would think this is a phenomenon of the future, because God says, I will create it in the future. These souls are only going to be around in the future. So the Midrash says, in the name of Rabbi Yossi Aglili, even all these new futuristic powers, they're not really created in the future. They're there already from creation, because creation is only once, but they're on standby. These are levels that have never been kind of introduced into our zone, into our reality. They're there. The heaven and the earth that we're talking about of the future exists already, but outside of our reality, including these souls also exist. They're not new in the future, because God is never creating anything new anymore. He's just revealing. So, kvar hen beruyim mesheishis and bereishis. Even the new heavens of the future, they're already created in the 6 days of creation. This is why it says, Kasher Hachadashim, the new heavens, they're standing currently before me, God says. They're new creations that I am making, but yet they're new because it's new to us. So since those heavens and the earth is related to the new souls of the future, so it's like it says in Sefer HaGilgulim, Sham Shegama Neshamas Hachadashim, that even the new souls are now Nivreu b'Sheishis and Bereishis. We're already created in the 6 days of creation. Now it makes more sense to understand how the Alter Rebbe can be such a soul, because it's not like totally new. It's just there. Once in a while, God drops one of those souls into the world when He needs to bring someone who's completely out of the box thinking. So you can't have someone, it can't be based on everything we've known. It has to be from, like an Einstein type of like someone who throws everything off and like completely that idea. A revolutionary soul who revolutionizes everything. Okay. Then there will be a new heaven and a new earth. Then I am doing it on my own. in the next piece, Perek Hey, he's going to explain, notwithstanding the complete takeover by those futuristic souls and this new heaven and the earth, which will kind of stun the maybe we will say that our heaven and earth we will enjoy when the days of Mashiach, like till the seventh millennium, like another 200 years, we will. But after that, kind of, we will be totally forgotten. We will be taken over by these super souls, and it will be almost like we're like nobodies. Anything, we're coming along for the ride, but we're like whatever. We're like, so that's why the verse continues, and he says, "So just like my heaven and earth standing before me," God continues, and he says, "So your children and your name will also stand before me forever." So he's going to explain that your children doesn't mean your children; it means your seeds that you've seeded, whatever you've seeded, and whatever your name, which is referring to the mitzvahs and the fear of God that drove our mitzvahs, the acceptance of heaven, which is called the name. Although it's of the inferior type that we're making today, God says, I'm not going to destroy that. I will always remember that, not just that. I will embed that in the future heaven and earth. So it will always be there. And you will always realize that everything that's happening in the future, you are responsible from your work that you did. This is, by the way, to me, the source, the amazing teaching that the Rebbe teaches in Nun Beis, Nun Aleph Nun Beis, where the Rebbe teaches about that the whole idea of Geula is to reveal the Aleph in exile. And the Rebbe goes into explain that there's 3 levels of Aleph. One level of Aleph is Alufa Shel Olam, the master of the world. The other level of Aleph is Aleph Chachma, Aleph Chabina. I will teach you wisdom, I will teach you understanding. And the 3rd level of Aleph is Pele. And the Rebbe says what that means is we have to realize that even the most distant revelations that are going to happen in 1 billion years, no matter how far we're going to go, it's always going to be connected to the work we did in exile. And because it's really produced by the work that we do in darkness. Although the levels we're talking, and it's mamish what we're learning over here in the next piece. Your name and your children and your name. Let's read the next. I was going to quit now, but let's do it. We're going to go Perek Hey as well. So will stand just like the new heavens that are standing before me. So your children and your name will always stand before me. What does that mean? It is known. Through the fulfillment of mitzvahs in this world. During this period of time of the current world is when God gave us time to do mitzvahs. We add lights above. We add godly illumination, like we said earlier. We are the ones who light up we light up paradise. We light up Gan Eden. But we know that the main bulk of the light that we're lighting up is going to be revealed in the days of Mashiach. It's going to be revealed in the future. When he says in the future, he doesn't mean the new heaven and the new earth. He means like this. The way I was a little bothered with this before, but now it became clear to me. There is various different periods. There is currently Gan Eden, and our mitzvahs that we do down here cause fireworks in Gan Eden. Good way of putting it. Fireworks in Gan Eden. Fine. Party in Gan Eden from the mitzvahs we do now. But that's only considered a little ray of our mitzvahs. The real reward of our mitzvahs and the real display of our mitzvahs is going to be in the next stage, which is called Yemois HaMashiach, the days of Mashiach. That means after Mashiach is revealed, speedily today, and we have a 3rd temple, in that period of time is when the real fireworks are going to go off. Meaning the real powerful lights of our mitzvahs that we've done, our seeds will sprout. What we've planted will sprout. with spectacular, powerful revelations down here, greater than Gan Eden. But that's not yet the 7th millennium. Then comes the 7th millennium. 7th millennium is when God is rewarding us. That's not reward. That's just reaping the work that we planted. That's not reward. Reward is that now God said that you made my world so beautiful. Let me reward you. I'll give you something that you didn't do. So the reward is next. That's the new heaven and the new earth that God is going to create in the 7th millennium. That's even higher than the days of Mashiach. That's called Elef HaShvi. And that's what we were learning earlier, in which we're going to be taken to levels that are just out. So, but our work and our seeds is also not something to sneeze at. And it's going to be revealed in the days of Mashiach. However, we might believe that our plantings that we planted and our name, as we're soon going to see, this idea, all of our will be meaningful in the days of Mashiach, but once we go into the 7th millennium, it will be totally forgotten. So that's what Hashem is saying. No, your name, your plantings, and your names will always be etched. That's the idea. The Nikra. So this that is revealed in La'asad Lavoi in the days of Mashiach. The Nikra b'Shem Zriya v'Tzmicha, and it's called sowing and growth and sprouting. We sow now, we plant now, and we reap the fruits of our labors in the days of Mashiach. These 3 discourses that discuss this at great length, that we sow now, but the revelation of it happens in the future. This is like planting a seed. We plant a seed in the earth. So which means like this, we think we're doing something tiny, something small. What did I do already? I cooked dinner for someone who needed dinner, Someone, my neighbor, fell down, broke. I asked them if I could help them. And they said, I asked them what you able to take care of. He said, I'll bring you chicken soup. I'll bring you something. Oh, it's a small little deed. Almost don't go noticed. It's a seed. It's a seed of divinity. We plant a small thing, but when you plant the seed, what happens? The power in the earth, which is much greater than your seed, takes that seed and it blasts it out as an entire tree comes out. Wow. So the divine power that God put in the earth, that to be activated by the small deeds that we do. With so much added and so much and with such quality. And this is a beautiful but frustrating thought, but beautiful at the same time. It's frustrating. You'll see why in a moment. The longer the seeds sit in the ground, and the longer it takes for them to sprout, the higher the quality plantings growths are going to be, which is the horrific excuse of why it's taking so long for Mashiach to come, because it's going to be much better by the time it grows. God is keeping those seeds hidden and hidden and hidden, because the longer they sit buried in the earth before they shoot out, they're going to be the garden is going to be of greatest. So it's a beautiful thought, but frustrating, because that's what's driving us insane, that it's taking so long. The longer our mitzvahs that we've done that are buried in this earth, it will be the earth will then produce a better seed. A better plant, a better fruit tree, or whatever it is. The same way, by way of analogy, the duration of time of what we call the time of darkness, that we don't see light, but this is when we get things done. We can only get things done in the time of darkness. This is the time of planting. We plant in supernal earth. Al Yedei Kiyum. No, when we do a mitzvah here, it's getting planted in the Shekhinah, which is called earth, and from there it will sprout forth. Al Yedei Kiyum mitzvahs, through the mitzvahs. V'atzmicha, but the planting, Yela Asid Lavoi, is going to be in the days of Mashiach in the future. And that is the reason. Now, Zarachem means your seeds, like planting, but it also means your seed representing the idea of pregnancy. Also, it's a form of planting. It's placed in the seed, which creates a child. The longer the child is in the womb, babies that come out earlier and faster are generally not that healthy. And in times past, these babies preemies didn't live. Today's days, we have better systems to be able to keep the kids in incubators and keep them kind of and bring them to good health. Same idea. You want the baby to be there full term, and the longer, at a certain point, it's so. But it's the same. The idea is that you plant and it's not visible immediately. So exile and this whole period of time is the same. We're creating Mashiach in the hidden world. Mashiach is being born. And this is where it explains the sadness of what we're going through right now, which is the pangs of birth, contractions, because we're holding literally at the birth. Like it says, that Zion has cramped. She went into labor. Zion went into labor. We, the Jewish people, are now in labor. The world is now in labor. In some way, we can say, and the longer, God forbid, this concealment lasts, which means that our mitzvahs are not yet revealed to the world. They remain in the hidden state. What does that mean? That the exile continues indefinitely, very long, until the days of Mashiach, which frustrates everybody. Yet we know the reason for this delay is for what reason? And the time of the resurrection. It gets pushed off. It seems like it's we always think it's here and it's not here yet. God forbid. And what happens during this time? All the divine energies that we're activating are concealed. During this entire waiting period, all the godly lights that we brought to the world is concealed. It's all like a seed that's covered by the earth, or like a fetus that's within the mother, so you don't see the baby. And the longer it takes, what does the Alter Rebbe say? The growth in the future is going to be b'toisvis Eloi Rav. It's going to be with greater, it's going to be so much more powerful. V'zehu, hear these words. There's an incredible, beautiful prophecy regarding Mashiach's time of the redemption. V'zehu, and this is what it says, V'omar b'yoymahu. You will say on that day, V'omar b'yoymahu. It's one of the verses we say by our prophets. And Ataresa, sadly, in the midst of all this, what was going on in the world. So I'm including this pain because what's going to happen? That you will say on that day, this is my God. And it says you will point with your finger. And God says to each and every one, and you will say, this is my God, you will point. Kivinu loy, we hope for him all the time. V'yoshienu, and he saved us. In other words, even though you're waiting and waiting and waiting, and at times you were ready to throw in the towel. You were ready to give up and say, forget it, I'm out. But you didn't give up. And you waited and waited. In the end, you will point with your finger and say, this is the one we've been waiting for. We waited. This is God. We hope for him. And now we're rejoicing and sing. We're delighting and singing and dancing in His salvation. That's the simple meaning. The deeper meaning. It's not like, oh, we've been waiting for God and God in the end showed up. He showed up, nice. You will say on that day, Zahashem, this revelation that we're having right now, that we're ready, Kivinu lo, we channeled Him. This is what we've been doing all this time. This is what has been brewing. This is what we created. We're not going to feel like, oh, God is awesome. He came and He saved us. No, we're going to realize that all that godliness was us. And that's the meaning. The word kivinu means hope, also means we channeled Him. Because the word kivinu means we made Him into kav. There's three kavim, there's three channels. One side is Torah, one side is prayer, and one side is mitzvahs. These are the three channels, chesed, gevurah, tiferes, through which Hashem channels His light into the world, which we create through our mitzvahs that we do. So we channeled Him. You will realize then that all that, and again, as he said, the longer it takes, the more powerful it's going to be. We still don't agree that it should be any longer because we've done enough. We've done more than enough. The baby's going to be pretty beautiful already. So let's read it inside. You will say, we hoped for Him. The godly light that is going to be revealed to us now. You're going to say then, you're going to say all this divine revelation that's happening, that we're finally experiencing it, who al yadei was created through shekivinu loy. What does that mean? Simply, it means we hope for Him. The deeper meaning, we channeled Him into channels, and we've downloaded Him. Kol meshach hayoim la'asoisam, the entire period of time in which it says today is the time to do them. We do the mitzvahs, we download it now, although the download is concealed. It's only that our wonders we don't see. We don't see what we ourselves are doing. But then we're going to say, wow, this was really worth it. And now, royim we see. In other words, he's saying what we're going to say then. Now we finally get to see what we've been told all along we're doing, but we didn't see it. Now we're in a way of revelation. And we say, this is Him that we've been channeling. Look in Midrash Rabbah. And that's called our planting. And as he's going to explain now. Our seeds that we've been planting. Now, by the perfectly righteous, by the holy tzaddikim, by the saintly people, it says that light is planted in the tzaddik. That means, I think the way I understand what he's saying is, tzaddikim, they kind of have these lights already today. The light has been planted for them already. So they experience godliness, they see godliness. To them, it's the world is full of light. They pain the pain because we're pained. But in their own personal experiences, the Baal Shem Tov, they see the lights. So for them, the light is already zarua. Zarua means the light is already planted. But by Baalei Tshuva, by all the rest of us that are called Baalei Tshuva, penitents, Ksiv Ashreichem, it says, fortunate Zoirei al Kol Mayim, who are planting over the waters. Planting seeds next to the water. What does that mean? Shalat tzadikim, for the righteous, kfar nizra'or, for them it was already planted. Avala Baalei Tshuva, but the penitents, hemazoidem ata, they keep on planting now. Kol meshech da'achshav. We're only busy making seeds. We don't see our lights. We can't see this incredible godliness. But the Navi promises us. What does the Navi promise? The prophet promises us, and he says, "Ken yamid zarachem, so will stand your seeds." Now, this planting that we've planted, of all the good deeds that we've done, V'shimchem, and your name, what does that mean? Before we can plant the seed of godliness in this world, first we have to accept God's kingship. Then we can do it. Because mitzvahs are only powerful and only have its desired effect when they come as a result of a deeper servitude. We can't do mitzvahs just because we feel like it, we love it, we like this mitzvah, it feels good. The mitzvah needs to be based on a subservience. I know I'm God's servant and I'm doing his mitzvahs. And that's called your name, because kingship is called a name. I'm not going to get into it right now. Kingship is the attribute of like we say, I'm just going to give an example, a proof to that. We say, Baruch Shem Kavod Malchusai. Blessed is the name of his glorious kingdom. So that's shame related to Malchus. So what it's saying is, all of your mitzvahs that you've done, and all of your name, which means all of your acceptances, that you accepted God's kingship when you didn't see him, experience him when it was in the dark. And yet we plowed through and we did his mitzvahs. David shame that David made a name, which is the acceptance of the yoke of heaven. Which is before the acceptance of mitzvahs. But as the sages say, first one should accept upon himself the yoke of heaven, and afterwards we accept the mitzvahs, the yoke of mitzvahs. Why? Remember we said earlier, a mitzvah is a seed. Where do you have to plant it? You have to plant it in the earth. Earth is the attribute of kingship, which is the Shekhinah, that's the earth. So you first need to, in order to get your seed into the earth, you have to have that, you have to be connected. The soul has to be connected to the Shekhinah by us accepting the sovereignty of the Shekhinah. Then when we do an act as a result of that, we're planting a seed in the Shekhinah, in the earth. To be able to make sprout forth this light. We first need to accept the yoke of heaven. And then also. So that's our seeds. So what the prophet is telling us, don't think that this incredible accomplishment will be enjoyed for, let's say, 200 years, until the end of, let's say Mashiach comes today, there's another 200 and so years till the beginning of the 7th millennium. So for doing this 200 years, you'll enjoy your seeds. Afterwards, they'll disappear because there'll be a much greater heaven and a much greater earth. So he's saying no. Then your heaven and the earth that you've created now, which is the earth, is the throne. The heaven is my throne, and the earth is my footstool. This is called your seeds and your name. Your racing and your return. I'm not exactly sure how to set that, because according to the way I understood now this part, both the seeds and the name are both related to mitzvahs. One is acceptance, the yoke, and the other one is doing the mitzvah as a result of that. But over here, suddenly he throws Zarachem v'Shimchem back to the heaven and the earth. Your work that you've done in heaven and earth, the rapturing of love and the drawing the energy down. But when he explained over here seeds and name, it seems both regarding our downloading godliness down here, not so much. So I'm not exactly sure where he finds the rutzah here, the racing here. I don't know. But whatever it is, that gamkin lamed lefanai, that's going to remain standing before me. That too is going to tap me in my inside, like the new heaven and the new earth, which is, as we said earlier, registering in the inner element of God, not on the back. Your heaven and earth, which initially is only connected to God's back, is going to be upgraded into God's front, into the higher revelation. Which is higher than the heaven is my throne. Because on the throne you can only sit your body, not your head. But once I upgrade your heaven and your earth into my heaven and earth, then it's going to be lefanai, in front of me, in front of my face, which is the head, which is much higher than what is going on the throne. There's one more piece over here, but after that there is a biur. So I'm going to leave this one more piece because to finish next week. Simply, I didn't even learn it yet. And then we're going to begin next week the biur on the Maimer, because I'm sure that will enrich the whole thing. We'll make a siyum on Lekutei Torah, even though we didn't learn everything yet. We'll at least have done the last Maimer. So let's try to do it one more week. a lot to learn next week then, but let's hope to do maybe a marathon next week. And Bez Hashem, before that, Mashiach should be here already.